Thank you, Adam, most kindly for those introductory remarks, and may I offer my congratulations to all of the new inductees to this Pierian chapter of Waterboard Senior Collegiate Honor Society. And thank you indeed for inviting me. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. And for reasons that will become apparent in just a few moments, the title of my lecture this afternoon is Temporary Endings and Permanent Beginnings. You see, it is likely that human nature and the impermanence of individual life causes us to focus on the ending of things rather than on their beginnings. Too often, we ascribe a sense of finality to endings and even consider beginnings as simply the start to the ending of things. But the reality is that once a thing is begun, it cannot be unbegun. It can be stopped, it can be delayed, it can be transformed, it can be completed. Indeed, a beginning must evolve into something else if we are to be productive and successful. And the entire chain of events, beginnings, middles, endings, all are part of the process that we know as change. And although we may be resistant to it, change is essential, it is inevitable. In fact, it is the one universal constant. Can we, I think this may be interacting with, no, that's off. Okay. Somehow or other, we got a little bit of an echo. I'll try to be back here. Or is this it? Oh, okay, we're good. We're doing this. So if we are wise, we will learn to embrace change because with it comes opportunity. But perhaps that is too large a topic for us to deal with this afternoon. I guess I can cover that ground at another time, although I wonder if it is possible to do a sequel to a last lecture. So let's get back to beginnings. We already have established that however you transform a beginning, you cannot roll back time and prevent its occurrence. Therefore, beginnings are, in a sense, permanent. That is why they are so precious and so powerful. Consider that endings, though much celebrated, are secondary to beginnings. Endings cannot exist independent. For something to end, it first must have begun. Think in terms of light and darkness. Darkness is understood by physicists and philosophers alike as merely the absence of light. The absence of light. It is not a thing unto itself. You cannot turn on the dark. You can only turn off the light. Likewise, you can only end what you have begun. Still, despite the contingent nature of endings, they have a particular appeal to us human beings. Just consider why we are here tonight. We could address this event as a celebration of a new lecture series. We could focus on the initiative demonstrated by you, the students of Mortarboard, but we are intrigued by that word last. It has an irrevocable sound to it, almost a tragic bittersweetness. Maybe that is why poets and novelists and screenwriters are so fond of that word. They speak of a last dance, they speak of a last kiss, a last sunset. You can almost imagine the book jacket or the movie poster that goes along with it. But in day-to-day life, last is rarely an accurate description. Indeed, you must be a card-carrying pessimist to find much use for that word. Now, as Adam told you a few moments ago, this lecture series is based on a very poignant and popular last lecture by Randy Pausch, as he indicated, a former professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University. And in 2006, Dr. Pausch received from his physicians a diagnosis of terminal pancreatic cancer. He was informed that he had at best 3 to 6 months left of good health. On September 19th of 2007, he gave his now famous last lecture at Carnegie Mellon. A video of it went viral on YouTube, and you can still find it and look at it, and it is indeed quite inspiring. And yet, after this last lecture, Randy Pausch kept on talking. He did several media appearances, testified before Congress on behalf of pancreatic cancer research, returned to Carnegie Mellon to give another lecture at commencement, and then co-authored a book entitled The Last Lecture, which became a New York Times bestseller. On July 25, 2008, this busy and optimistic and inspiring man finally succumbed to the disease that had claimed him. Randy Pausch had given his last lecture, or had he? As English author Terry Pratchett so elegant wrote, do you know that a man is not dead while his name is still spoken of? The biological manifestation of Randy Pausch is indeed no more, but his thoughts, his concepts, his influence are quite alive today and appear to have a very promising future. For example, I give a copy of Randy's book to each of our student responders at every commencement, so believe me when I say that his lecture is a lecture that keeps on being given. The fact is that endings are somewhat illusory. While a beginning cannot be undone, endings most certainly can be. The simple word resume exposes the alleged finality of endings for the illusions that they are. Let's look at an immediate, simple example. Many of you fine members of Mortarboard soon will be crossing the stage as part of commencement. I spoke to a couple of them, to a couple of you a moment ago. Now, I'm sure that a significant number of you have had enough of finals, of papers, of practicums, of clinicals, and I know that you're looking forward to that day next month when your education finally comes to an end. Okay, you might say my college education will come to an end. At the risk of being redundant, I say again, oh, really? Because in today's knowledge economy, global knowledge economy, do you really think you can afford not to gain new knowledge as you go forward? It may come in traditional forms like getting an MBA or some other graduate degree. It may be a certificate earned through continuing education, or it may well be a MOOC taken online. You know about MOOCs, right? But additional education there will be. Yes, no? Massive open online courses, pioneered in a few institutions, including the University of Akron. So again, but additional education there will be. No graduation marks an end to education. It's just a pause, it's a transition, and that is probably why graduation ceremonies are called commencements. Well, let us now consider the impermanence of endings in what you might describe as somewhat grander and perhaps even breathtaking levels of scale. You see, in his fascinating book, The Universe Within, Neil Shubin explains how the very atoms that make up each of our bodies can be traced back to the Big Bang. The molecules that are so busy right now with the myriad tasks taken to keep us alive were also present during the formation and maturation of the Earth, indeed the formation of the universe. Bill Bryson, another noted author, wrote similarly about this in his book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and I quote his language. He says, "The atoms that so liberally and congenially flock together to form living things on Earth are exactly the same atoms that decline to do so elsewhere. Whatever else it might be at the level of chemistry, life is curiously mundane. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, a little calcium, a dash of sulfur, a light dusting of other very ordinary elements. Nothing you wouldn't find in any ordinary drugstore. And that's all you need. The only thing special about the atoms that make you is that they make you. And that, of course, is the miracle of life." Close quotes. Well, for me, the realization that the stuff of which we are made is, in a very real sense, immortal, if you can say that, about stuff, happens to be a very awe-inspiring concept. It can be said that we are only borrowing the atoms that make up our bodies. The components of these self-same atoms existed before we were born and will continue to exist after we are gone. There is no ending for them. And what lucky atoms these are. They could be many other things, but instead of contributing to a rock here or to a stick of wood someplace else, these atoms have the great good fortune and high honor of being part of you, or you, or you, Adam. Where did Adam go? He was right there. There he is. He went back there. He was over here a minute ago. Okay. You have the stuff of asteroids and dinosaurs in your bones, in your bodies. And so do we all. Now, someone named George Wald, who I hope you'll read about somewhere along, he was a Nobel Prize-winning chemist and biologist that discovered the structure and function of vitamin A in vision, addressed this concept in a very powerful and beautiful way, and I want to share that with you. Here's what he said, I quote, listen carefully and I'll repeat it because this is truly about as powerful a statement as you can possibly make. Surely, this is a great part of our dignity, that we can know and that through us, matter can know itself. That beginning with protons and electrons out of the womb of time and the vastness of space, we can begin to understand that organized as in us, the hydrogen, the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen, those 16 to 21 elements, the water and sunlight, all having become us, can begin to understand what they are and how they came to be. Powerful. Let me read that again to you, okay? Surely, this is a great part of our dignity, that we can know and that through us, matter can know itself. That beginning with the protons and electrons out of the womb of time and the vastness of space, we can begin to understand that organized as in us, the hydrogen, the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen, those 16 to 21 elements, the water and the sunlight, all having become us, can begin to understand what they are and how they came to be. So, how is it that we can grasp these kinds of lofty and poetical complexities of our being, as just articulated in the words of George Wald, and still be fooled by the illusory nature of endings? How is it? Well, perhaps one of the reasons we have trouble appreciating the true and transitory nature of endings and the permanence of beginnings is because they often so easily blend one into another. Even when we think the boundaries are clear-cut, they are not. Let me give you a personal example of what I mean. As a young professional working in Washington, D.C. far too many years ago for me to tell you when, I happened to walk across a traffic circle that had previously driven around many times, but never noticed the stature within it nor who it was to. As it happened, now walking right by it, I discovered that it was a statue of Benito Juarez, the first president of Mexico, which happens to be where I was born. And inscribed on that plaque was something that Juarez had said back in 1810. And suddenly my mind became filled with memories of my childhood, of the history that I had studied, of so many other things. You see, it was a statement on that plaque that every school child in Mexico learns, just as all of you once learned and hopefully continue to know the Pledge of Allegiance. Let me recite it for you. How many of you speak Spanish? Anybody? Okay, so I'm going to say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English for you. El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Translated almost perfectly literally, respect for the rights of others is peace. El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respect for the rights of others is peace. Well, that simple and powerful statement has inspired countless discussions, many interpretations, but for our purposes today, we can see it as representative of the blurred line between endings and beginnings. Whether you're talking of nations or of neighbors, peace actually emerges earlier than we often think. Peace does not necessarily begin with the signing of a treaty or a handshake. Peace appears and begins to grow as soon as our actions cause intolerance and disrespect to falter and evaporate. In this case, the endpoint of one and the beginning of the other is less important than our commitment to seeing the process continue until we have achieved real respect for the rights of others. Then we may enjoy the benefits of peace in all of its manifestations. The transition between an ending and a beginning can be obscure, but only because endings are by their nature so often indistinct and temporary. Beginnings, on the other hand, are more easily identified and defined because beginnings start with an action. Speculations and cogitations, planning and dreaming, all of these are fine foundational work for beginnings, but they remain mere intangibles without substance until you take action. And that leads me to my last point, the power of beginnings. Now, in my 15 years with you at this university, or at least with many of you, some of you have been here a little less, I have repeated a particular quote countless times. As someone once observed, if your message is important, you must repeat it over and over and over again, because communication is somewhat akin to talking to a parade. No sooner have you said one thing that you have to say it again for the next and for the next and for the next. You know, you can understand that. You go by here, you say it, you got to say it again and again and again. So, to our students who are relatively recent arrivals of campus, this will sound new. To many of my colleagues who've been here a little longer, you've heard it so many times that please feel free to join with me as I recite these wonderful words from the great German poet Goethe. Again, I quote, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elemental truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitively commits oneself, then providence moves too. Whatever you dream or think you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic to it. Begin it now." And so, to you, the members of Mortar Board, and the other seniors here who will soon graduate, I say this is not your last year at the University of Akron, but the beginning of your relationship as alumni of this institution. To my colleagues, when you find yourselves, as I do now, at a turning point in your career, recall the phoenix that graces the seal of our university, and do not see in your transition the last glimmer of past endeavors, but instead the creative sparks that will ignite a new chapter in your lives. And finally, if you think this last lecture is either as a president or as an educator, sorry to disappoint you. Thank you so very much, and good evening. Thank you for inviting me.